Hello, everybody. Welcome to this new appointment with Vetagro. My name is Richard Paratte, and I'm glad to wish you a happy World Milk Day. Cheers. Today, we are celebrating the milk in all its different aspects. And for this occasion, we will have a chat with experts in the dairy world discussing about the hot topics of the dairy industry. Let me introduce our first guest, Professor Lance Baumgard. Thank you, Lance. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Lance grew up on a mixed livestock and row crop farm in southwestern Minnesota. He received his Bachelor of Science and Master of Science degree from the University of Minnesota and a PhD from Cornell University. He joined the University of Arizona faculty in 2001 and then joined Iowa State University in 2009 as the Norman Jacobson Professor of Nutritional Physiology in the Department of Animal Science. Baumgard's primary research emphasis has been on the metabolic and endocrine consequences of heat stress in growing and lactating animals. In particular, he is interested in determining the consequences of leaky gut and to identify nutritional strategies to improve gut integrity. So, Lance, considering your research field, I cannot help but ask you questions about global warming. So let's go straight to the hot topics. As you teach us, heat stress has a huge impact on dairy cows. So we already see every day how higher temperatures are influencing cows' efficiency. We may consider dairy milk one of those animal products that is feeding the world. And dairy milk consumption will increase in the future, in particular in developing countries. As they are increasing their GDPs, they will increase also the milk consumption. How does the global warming is impacting and will impact in the future the world dairy production?
Yeah, well, heat stress in particular is already a huge constraint to farm animal productivity. And of course, dairy cattle are in particularly sensitive to heat stress because one, they have a very low surface area to mass ratio, so they can't get rid of heat as easily as other farm animals can, and they generate a lot of metabolic heat. So they're pretty sensitive to heat stress already. So of course, in Europe, North America, heat stress is an economic issue. Farm animals produce less when they become heat stressed. But in developing countries, in some developing countries, it's a food security issue. Right? Literally, can potentially be a life or death situation for making of food. And of course, milk is a highly nutritious food. So it's already a huge problem, Richard. I think with climate change, it's going to become a bigger issue, of course. But in addition to climate change, genetic selection, excuse me, genetic selection for phenotypes like increased milk yield, lean tissue accretion, all these phenotypes or traits that are economically valuable to us, and we are continuously selecting on them, they're all associated with increased heat production. In other words, the more productive a farm animal is, the more heat they generate. And the more heat they generate, the ambient temperature at which they become stressed will continue to go down. So our farm animals today are more susceptible to heat stress than our grandfathers and grandparents' farm animals were. And in 30 years from now, farm animals will be more sensitive to thermal stress than they are currently. So it's a huge issue that we need to figure out, and we need to figure out soon.
And the tropical type of cows are less productive. They are more resistant, but they are also less productive. So we cannot imagine to use those type of animals to produce in the future.
You're right. You're 100% right. There are farm animals that, of course, excel in really hot conditions, but during thermoneutral time periods, they're not as productive. So maybe it's a genetic situation where we can identify the genes associated for thermotolerance and take advantage of them in an animal that is productive when it's not hot. That could be potentially one strategy.
But for sure, it's not easy because it will take time to project, to study a new cow and develop it.
Yeah, definitely not easy. And of course, probably the biggest impact a producer can have, large or small stakeholder, is to modify the environment, right? Shade, utilizing evaporative cooling, fans, etc. But of course, these come at a substantial amount of upfront capital. And frequently in developing countries, this startup capital just isn't there. So, right, what type of strategy that do they have access to? Well, a nutritional supplement probably is the best opportunity because it's something that can be added to a diet when it gets hot or prior to becoming hot, right? So it's easily modified and hopefully not very expensive.
So we always think about the impact directly on the dairy cow. But for sure, global warming will impact also on the forages because we see extreme weather changes and flooding and other types of clinical and environmental disasters that are also reducing the availability of the forages.
Yep, this is 100% correct. And as scientists, we almost always focus on the cow and the biology and the consequences of heat stress on the cow. But in reality, of course, the feed that the cattle are eating were probably grown also in a heat stress environment. And one of the ways a plant tries to conserve water is by increasing the lignin, right? Increasing the structural carbohydrate content of the plant is a strategy the plant utilizes to prevent moisture loss, which is great for plant survival. It's not great for digestibility. So yeah, this is we need to look at climate change and heat stress holistically from an entire system. Not only is that negatively affecting cattle, but it's reducing the digestibility of the feed that the cattle is consuming. Huge issue.
Yeah. And do you think we will face also new pests, new illnesses coming from this global change? I mean, now we are talking about coronavirus, zoonoses, but for sure in the future we will see, even for our animals, something different.
Yeah. So again, what is oftentimes studied is the negative consequences of hypothermia on an animal's immune system. The immune system is thought to be compromised, not as effective. Okay, that's one side of the story. The other side of the story is that heat stress is probably going to increase environmental pathogen load. So now you have different viruses and ticks and other potentially immune activating scenarios that are probably going to flourish in some regions and maybe actually go down in other regions. It's all unknown, but yeah, the entire environment, again, going back to this holistic approach, is going to be changing with with climate change. I'm sorry, and so morbidity and mortality are going to change, and it's going to be due to multiple reasons, not just the fact that the cow's immune system has been maybe compromised by heat.
Yeah, and I think we should start to think about not just our neighborhood, but also on other countries, because when we think about heat stress, we think of our own cows. But if those ticks or mosquitoes or illnesses that are coming from them are coming from other countries, we will be facing them sooner or later. So we really have, you were right, we really have to think holistically to this problem.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, no doubt, and especially in even feed, right? Feed is shipped all over the world. Right?
Exactly.
And the conditions by which those feed, the environmental conditions by which that the feed grew in, is going to have large impact. I know I lived in Arizona for 10 years. We ship a lot of alfalfa hay to Japan, for example. Well, so the climate change occurring in Arizona could have a huge impact on milk production in Japan. just one small example of what we're talking about, right?
Yeah. So if you ask you to imagine how it will be the dairy farming in 30 years, in 2050.
Yeah. I think climate change will continue to regionalize animal agriculture, including dairy. And what I mean by that is that there are just some environments that are not conducive to dairy farming in particularly. And what I'm talking about is what we're seeing in America right now. The Southeast United States is a hot environment, particularly that's not just being hot in and of itself isn't the worst component of it, but it's also quite humid. And of course, when you have hot and humid conditions, now the opportunity to utilize evaporative cooling as a strategy to keep cows from getting hot is reduced, right? I mean, there's areas of the world that are very hot, Arizona, Saudi Arabia, etc., who have fantastic production. Well, they have fantastic production because they're very arid environments and can take advantage of evaporative cooling. So my point of that is you're going to continue to probably see regionalization of animal agriculture. Of course, the population, global population is increasing, but it's increasing near the tropics primarily. So it's likely that animal agriculture is going to migrate with this explosion of human population. And of course, the tropics are generally pretty warm. And then, I've already mentioned water. Well, in these arid environments, water availability is going to have a huge impact, I think, on farming. And you don't have to go very far, at least in the United States, to look at California, right? California is constantly interested in water and having access to water rights. And the potential then of not having enough water is also probably going to dictate dairy farming, where dairy farming occurs.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that in the future we will continue to select cows, like for example, following the Holstein, or we will go in a different direction, selecting animals for, I don't know, tropics or more different zones? I mean, we will have not Holstein, but we will have a tropical cow, we will have an arid area cow.
Yeah, we already pretty much have that, right? We have animals that thrive in different environments. And I think, we've seen this go wrong in the past where you take a highly productive animal that's evolved to live in a particular environment and you put that animal in a different spot, for example, and it just doesn't do as well. So
like the heifers bought in New Zealand and brought to China.
Exactly. Or North American genetics going to New Zealand when the animals were reared, the last 75 years on a TMR, not necessarily genetically selected to thrive on a pasture-based system. Yeah, no doubt.
So you mentioned before also the changes in the forages, how the plant is reacting, and this let me think about a major and hot topic that is under the focus now. We cannot speak about global warming without thinking about greenhouse gases and methane production. Apparently, it seems that today most people doesn't know that a cow needs to calve to produce milk, but everybody knows that a cow is producing methane and polluting the world. This is the absurd situation we are in now. So I would like with you to go back a little bit to the basics. So why these bad cows are producing methane?
Well, that's really part of the digestion or fermentation process that occurs in the rumen. Actually, it occurs in the large intestine as well, and it occurs in the manure, by the way. Anyway, in process of digestion, especially of forages, Not to get into the biochemistry, but you have these carbohydrates being broken up, the fiber being broken up, and during the fermentation process, they can either be pyruvate can either go down to 3-carbon molecule called propionate. That's a very efficient process, or it can be converted into what's called acetate. It's a 2-carbon molecule, but in that process, you lose 1/3 of the carbon, and that CO2 is immediately reduced to methane because, of course, the rumen has a massive quantity of hydrogen in it, right? So it's reduced. That CO2 is made into methane, and the cow belches that methane off. Incidentally, like I said, that same process happens in a monogastric animal. It happens in the large intestine, and of course, it happens, like I said, in the manure pit, right? The digestion. Oh, by the way, it also happens in humans in our large intestine, right? And that's why we have flagellants, right? And it happens in we have what's called septic tanks in the United States, right? Where you have where the human waste goes. And anyway, my point of this is that this is an incredibly conserved digestive process, is the making of methane. That's kind of the basics. I don't know, Richard, if you wanted me to get into more biochemistry detail there, but it's just a normal process of digestion.
Basically, it's part of the process that allows the cow to degrade and digest products that were not available for the human and to transform it in high-value proteins like milk and meat.
100% accurate, right? A monogastric animal is not able to digest, to much extent anyway, structural carbohydrates that you'd find in a plant. And the ruminant animal, because of its pre-fermentation, pre-gastric fermentation compartments, can, right? That's the beauty of a ruminant animal, is it's able to consume, like you already mentioned, this food stuff, feed stuff that's unsuitable for a monogastric, right? Straw, hay, structural carbohydrates, and convert it into an incredibly nutritious and tasty product. And that's in large part due to this pre-gastric fermentation compartment.
Yeah. So we know it's part of a problem, because of course methane is part of the greenhouse gases, and in general it's considered as converted in CO2 equivalent. So how can we try to solve the problem? I mean, eliminating the cows is not a solution. But maybe we can do something to reduce this methane production.
Yeah. So I think there's a variety of strategies, Richard. One, I guess I'll point out that I don't think animal agriculture is as big of a contributor to methane as some people say. Right? I think there's some controversy in that, but it's not my area of expertise. So how can we minimize methane production? Well, there's one, we can minimize it by the way we feed animals, right? For example, an animal that's on a higher grain diet makes less methane than an animal that is on a higher forage diet. And of course, this is easily observable in the United States when we feed beef cattle a higher grain diet. And they grow quicker, they're more efficient. And the reason why is because they conserve more of the carbon in feed in a volatile fatty acid called propionate, and that's conserved then into product, much higher than if you fed them a higher forage diet. And then you lose like I said, you lose 1/3 of the carbon when you feed a higher forage diet as methane. So nutritionally, we can modify greenhouse or methane production, and I know that there's a global search, a global interest by ruminant nutritionists in identifying target molecules that can potentially modify fermentation to minimize methane production. I've just been reading some things about seaweed. But at the end of the day, also, I want to emphasize is that high producing animals create less methane on a per unit of product. And this is key. So in my mind, low producing animals produce more produce more methane on a per product basis. So I think a key strategy that we need to have globally is to have farm animals, particularly ruminants, have high production, right? That's the key. Not only do high producing animals are more efficient, so thus they require less input, but importantly for this discussion, they create less methane on a per unit of product produced. So we need a strategy is to continue emphasizing high farm animal productivity, high milk yield.
Yeah. So basically, the more efficient the cow is, the less methane it's producing.
On a unit of product perspective,
of
yes.
Milk.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, then again, thinking holistically at our industry, right? If all our cows increase their productivity, we would need to have less cows, right, to produce the same quantity of product. And so and then of course they need less feed. And if you need less feed, you need less arable land. And if you need the air to work the land, you need less you need less fuel, fossil fuels. They're on the tractors. I mean, it's just a huge big system, right? Where, but at the end of the day, we need dairy cows to make as much milk as we can, as they can.
Yeah. And as we were talking before about the forages, a stressed forage will produce also more methane because it will be less digestible by the animal.
Totally. Yeah. And then 100%.
So we have all interest not only in working on cows, but also on the quality of the feed we are producing.
Agree with you 100%. Yep. At the end of the day, the engine that we need to strive for is increase in productivity. A higher producing dairy cow is an eco-friendly dairy cow.
Yeah, this is something that not everybody is thinking about. Usually, high producing cows in very modern dairy farms are considered like I don't know, cruel farms.
Yeah, that's insanity. This is an antiquated thought process that high producing farm animals are somehow stressed and that it's dangerous. I can't think of anything more wrong in biology because high productivity of any farm animal, specifically a cow, can only occur in the absence of stress, right? If the cow is unhealthy, if it's stressed, production goes down.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
In reality, the cows that are and the pigs and the chickens who are most productive, they are the least stressed and most healthy in the herd. I think this is an antiquated, parochial opinion about high production, and that's something that we as academics and people, scientists in the industry, need to make sure everyone knows. High productivity can only occur in the absence of stress. And by the way, high producing cows are more ecologically friendly.
Yeah, I think that as nutritionists and scientists, we have to improve our way we are communicating to the rest of the world. I think we have this role in feeding the world, and we have also to communicate that things are done in this way. Then of course there are bad guys that they destroy the image of everybody, but it's also our role to isolate them and to show how the reality is.
I agree 100%. We need to do a better job of communicating that farm animal products, milk and dairy products in particular, are incredibly nutritious, incredibly. right? The amino acid profile of dairy products is outstanding, and especially for young children, right? And we need to make sure that the critics and the alarmists and the activists, their message is countered by facts, and so the average consumer recognizes that this food is incredibly healthy, and we can make it in a sustainable manner.
Yeah, and we will go deeper on this subject with our next guest, Adam Locke, on this subject on milk as food. Going back to the methane question, if we are able to reduce methane production from the cows, I mean, as we have seen, it's a natural byproduct of the animal. Will the cow also benefit from this reduction?
That's a good question. I don't, other than increasing the efficiency of converting an input feed into product milk, I don't know if there'd necessarily be a benefit, a health benefit, but overall, from a system-wide perspective, yes, there would be a benefit to the system. Unless I'm not thinking of something correctly.
I mean, we are anyway increasing the efficiency of the animal.
Yes, no doubt.
So, and as we said, we can increase efficiency only when at a certain point when the animal is without stress. So if we are altering something that can create stress, we will not increase efficiency. And as we have seen, we can just reduce methane by increasing the quality of the forages. So it's not altering the microbiome of the rumen or the cow. It's just feeding a better quality forage that will reduce, we need less degradation, so it will increase the efficiency of the animal.
100%. 100% agree with you. And also a balanced diet, right? This is where the ruminant nutritionist comes in to make sure that during that fermentation process, there's also then a synchronization of other nutrient fermentation, for protein in particular. Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
So the different solutions that are proposed now on the market, most of them, they are not doing something wrong to the animal. They are just improving the degradation of the fiber, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So looking at these different aspects, what can we do in a practical way, starting from today, to reduce the impact of our dairy farms? What would you suggest?
Yeah. Well, I think there's many things, many things, and I hate to keep coming back to the same one over and over, but it's productivity, right? We need to maximize farm animal productivity. We know that there's some cows that can make 30,000, 35,000 kilograms of milk, right? But the average is what, 15 or 16,000. So we have a long way to go to get cows, all the cows, to meet their genetic potential. And I think that's a huge one. But there's other things, right? Anytime you have morbidity, sickness, you have inefficient use of resources, mortality is something that's a huge problem, right? When an animal dies on a farm, or this is an economic problem to the producer. It's an animal welfare issue for the industry, but it's also food wastage, right? We talk about food. We oftentimes talk about post-harvest food wastage, which occurs obviously in all the agriculture industries, not just animals. But when an animal dies on farm, we should start thinking of this as food wastage for humans, right? That's a carcass. It's not incorporated into the supply chain. That's a problem, right? So there's a variety of things we can do from a health perspective. That, of course, then ties in with overall farm animal productivity, but just improving all aspects of dairy farming will decrease our carbon footprint.
And this concerns not only, I mean, the most advanced farms, but also the medium-sized, the small farms, because everybody can increase its efficiency.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, this transcends farm size. Large stakeholders, small stakeholders, right? We're all in this together, right? What's the old saying? A rising tide. No, a rising tide increases all ships, or I can't remember. I shouldn't try to say a quip if I can't remember the damn quip.
Yeah, but in case of global warming and rising water level, it's it's matching.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, you want to add something else for our audience? Your major topic is heat stress and the consequences of heat stress in the dairy cows. Can we improve also in this way the efficiency of our animals?
In responding to heat.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is a big issue, right? Is because a heat stressed animal becomes less feed efficient, and when they become less, and not only do they become less feed efficient, they become less efficient on a holistic scale. So now the greenhouse gas emissions per unit of product produced goes up. So again, this goes back to what we've been talking about multiple times: is we want to maximize productivity. Maximizing productivity is there's goals and objectives from a climate change perspective, a carbon neutral perspective. So identifying mechanisms that can help maintain farm animal productivity during the summertime is a noble way of reducing our carbon footprint. And it's in cattle, it's in pigs, chicken, it doesn't matter, right? And by the way, eventually when we do identify the strategy to do that, it's probably going to transcend species, right? I think the effects of heat stress on farm animal biology, it's so conserved that if we can identify a target molecule or a strategy to minimize the negative consequences of heat stress, it will probably transcend all the species.
Yeah, because okay, we are talking in particular about milk, but for sure also meat will be concerned about this problem.
Yeah. I know we're probably winding down here, Richard, but we're both very fortunate to work in animal agriculture and dairy industry in particular. I'm honored to be part of it, and I just want to make sure people realize how nutritious our product is, and how already we're doing a great job from a sustainability perspective. But we need to get better.
Yeah, and also better communicate to
Exactly.
people what we are doing, probably.
Exactly.
I hope this chat like this one will help to increase the communication of our sector in other domains.
Yeah, I agree. It's always good talking to a fellow Cornellian. So good to see you again.
Thank you, Lance, for participating to this chat. We really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks to you. Thanks to Vetagro for hosting it. And tell all my Italian friends I said hi.
I will. And happy Milk Day.
Yes, happy Milk Day.
Right. Thank you, Lance.
You bet.
Let me introduce our next guest, Jessica Tekippe. Thank you, Jessica, for participating to this World Milk Day. Welcome. Jessica Tekippe is USA Western Ruminant Technical Sales Manager for Vetagro. So you are basically playing in-house. Her education includes a Bachelor of Science in Dairy Science from Iowa State University and a Master of Science in Dairy Nutrition from Pennsylvania State University. She has previously worked in technical roles with Ajinomoto Animal Nutrition and Arm & Hammer Animal Nutrition. In both roles, she has worked with innovative technologies that improve producer profitability and increase components. Jessica resides in Northeast Iowa with her husband and 3 kids, where they own and operate their own dairy and row crop operation. So basically, Jessica, you will have 2 caps here, the technician cap and the dairy farmer cap. Good. As we have seen, you have a wide experience in nutrients and in particular in amino acids. How do you imagine it will be the nutrients market in 30 years, let's say in 2050? What will we see on the market?
Well, to be honest, in the US is going to be a very different landscape than what we're seeing now. As we're evolving and pushing the production and the genetic potential of our dairy animals in the US, we're going to have to continue to push where we have amino acid nutrition. Right now, commercially, we talk about methionine and lysine a lot. Those are our 2 main commercially available amino acids. But when we approach 30 plus years from now, that list is going to continue to evolve for 2 reasons. The first is we're probably going to have some feedstuffs maybe taken away from the opportunity for us to use them due to demands for them in other areas, or our consumer demanding we feed animals differently. And so we're going to be forced to have to figure out a different way to get these amino acids. And the other one is just, as I mentioned, as these cows produce more milk, have more challenges to get pregnant while producing large amounts of milk. As our milk cooperatives say, you know, we just want more and more pounds of butter, fat, and protein because consumer trends in the US, fluid milk continues to have a decline. We're seeing some up increases, ticks in whole milk, but again, whole milk needs more butter fat in it. But we're really winning with our consumers is with our cheese consumption, and our butter really has been holding steady as well, and that entails we need more protein and butter fat, which has been linked back to how we're feeding amino acid nutrition. In addition, beyond amino acids, we're starting to learn so much more about just everything else in terms of different natural bioactives and how can we utilize plants that are maybe already growing across the globe and what compounds are being just naturally produced in them that, hey, if we feed it to a dairy cow, it can make her do some crazy things in terms of improving that ruminal fermentation, or also help prevent some of those issues we're having post-ruminally, such with leaky gut syndrome. And the other part that I think is interesting is our fatty acid nutrition. Feeding fat hasn't really evolved too much until recently. There's some cool things going on, and as we learn how fatty acids even react to amino acids, I mean, right now we're just talking about, in my world, how many grams of methionine, lysine, and what's the ratio of them. But I see myself in 30 years from now saying, okay, here's your amino acid grams of these 6 amino acids. Also, here is the ratio they all need to be. Oh, and on top of it, this is where each of your fatty acid grams need to be. And when we do that, you know, we talk about the historical view of jerseys being this high component. No, we're going to have Holsteins there, purebred Holstein animals, and we're not going to compromise production or fertility or animal health at all while doing this.
So we will know more and more about our dairy cows' physiology, and it's not that we will end up like the pharmacist working with all little amino acids, but we will know more, and we will have a different approach a more advanced approach than what we are having now.
And we will have an advanced approach. I mean, we talk about some of these record holders in the US. We've got dairy cows that in a year can produce 60, 70,000 pounds of milk. And that's fascinating because, you know, the other 9.4 million cows, what's holding them back? And I think, you know, part of it is management and facilities, but part of it is we are not where we can be nutritionally.
And as we were discussing with Lance before, a low producing cow is being less efficient. She is producing more methane than a much more efficient cow. And what is interesting, you were saying, is that also that probably we'll have some raw material that will not be available anymore. As we were discussing, the climate change will affect also forage quality, and probably forages or certain products, the lack of water or the increase of fiber will be less available for the animals. So we have to look for an alternative to improve the quality of these forages.
Yep, it's one thing we know in livestock agriculture, living in Iowa, #1 hog state in the US, that the pork industry's seen it of different technologies they can't use anymore. And there's just like, we have to just keep on evolving because we don't want to lose that production efficiency that we've gained, and we want to keep pushing forward. So we're going to have to evolve and kind of strategize different ways to meet the nutrients.
Yeah. So basically, we were considering amino acids till now for milk production, milk quality, but for sure they will help us also to increase the efficiency of our cows.
Yes, that is correct. Actually, there's been some really cool research if you start digging into it and looking at the amino acid lysine, that cows that are fed lysine tend to have a higher feed efficiency. So they're producing the same amount or more milk with the same feed intake. And we talk about efficiencies all the time, but sometimes we forget about even like reproductive efficiency. And I think It's really cool to see that methionine has been proven to really help with reproductive efficiency, helping that cow get pregnant faster and helping her return back to the lactating herd sooner.
Yeah, because if you don't get the cow pregnant, at the end you will not produce milk. Yeah, and do you think that utilization of rumen-protected amino acids is something just for the most evolved dairy farms, for the rich farms, or it's something for everybody?
See, what's great about amino acid nutrition is companies such as Vetagro and have really taken this technology and made it for everyone. I've had a great opportunity over the last decade to be on farms as small as 30 cows up to 100,000 cow herds. And you know what's kind of a common thing is that while there's some technologies not everybody's able to use, amino acid nutrition does not discriminate against size. I still remember the small little red barn I was in, and the guy, his kids, what they did was, it was their job to go, he had the high cows marked and the fresh cows because he knew they needed some more amino acids. And so they would have their little shovel and they would feed their extra amino acids to the high producing ones so that they could, he goes, this really is great and it helps me, it keeps the kids occupied. And a story a little bit closer to home, my husband and we're considered on the small size in today's dairy industry. We are 120 cows, but in the US, this last fall, we had a really strange thing happen with our milk pricing. We sell to a cheese plant, and in our federal milk marketing order, we're paid on components. And our milk protein price was all the way $5-6 for a lot of last fall through December. My butterfat price was down below $2. And so for me as a smaller farm, what I was able to do is adjust my diet on my own farm. I really pushed my ThyMet levels, increased my rumen protected methionine, and I drove my milk protein up to about a 3.5, 3.6 milk protein. And that allowed me to capture more money for my milk cooperative. And for me, one of the important things is that, our profitability and sustainability and amino acids have really been a key part for our operation.
Yeah, I can imagine, because, for example, here in Italy, we produce a lot of cheese, Parmesan cheese, and other similar types of cheese. So the milk components is a very important part of the milk. So now you can put again your dairy farmer hat on, and do you feel some pressure from the market or consumers to produce in a different way? I mean,
yes,
we see the consumers are changing. They are pretending different things. Do you feel this pressure?
Yes, and we've been feeling the pressure for quite some time in the US. And so we are working so hard to communicate with our consumers. We have a program called Check Off. It takes 15 cents per hundredweight. And with that, we have these incredible staffs at the regional and national level who really try to bridge those gaps. Some of the things they're doing is developing partnerships with like pizzas, like places like Domino's. So they thank dairy farmers right on their box, because they're ones who are really in the front line. Some of these, quick serve restaurants right with our consumers. And so if we can get them to share our positive messaging, me on the farm, I don't have much opportunity. And there's farmers that have great social media presences and they're really trying to share, this is why we do what we do. In the US, we're starting to become so many generations removed from the farm that sometimes we forget that when we're trying to explain farm things, they don't even really quite understand what we're even trying to say we're doing. So one thing I've started to do is actually, I've been invited to speak to some classes at some really urban, more non-agricultural oriented universities in the US. And so I kind of work as their capstone speaker for their environmental senior seminar. And this spring, I actually had a student ask me to well, you have kids, you're a mom. How can you spray your cornfields? Do your kids have cancer? And these students were really surprised when I told them that my family was extremely healthy and that there's not all these horrible things happening on the farm and my kids are out playing in the puddles and they're up playing in the feet, they're around the cows, and they did not realize how sustainable we have moved agriculture. Something that we need to stress and tell our story more about is that agriculture is probably going to be one of the first carbon neutral industries in the US. And actually, our current administration is even talking to us as producers and saying, hey, let's figure out some programs for you as farmers. I'm excited because I have another profit opportunity on my operation because I'm being told I can sell my carbon credits to the manufacturing industry because they're having an impact on the environment. So actually, I'm actually able to help industry and it makes another profit center for us and farmers. So it is the $1,000,000 question is how do we continue to reach these consumers and foods and experience? They want to feel good. And so a big part of this is we need to tell them that even though agriculture looks different, I don't milk in a red barn. My cows live in a freestall barn. Their milk's in a parlor. I may not wear overalls, but the same part of my DNA and the fabric of our community of caring about you as a consumer hasn't changed for the last 100, 200 years. And you know what? I'm raising my kids in a manner that they feel that same commitment to you, the consumer, and they hope to be the next generation of my operation to continue to grow food for your family as well.
Yeah, I definitely, we have to regain this contact with people, and people have to regain contact with the agriculture because they completely lost they don't even know from where the milk is coming. It's not coming from out of the box. It's coming from animals, and I think it's important to reset the center of all this thinking. So I think we absolutely have to change also the way we communicate, because I have the idea that we are a little bit suffering from this relationship, and we feel always under attack, and we have to learn to educate people. It's not easy. It's not easy for sure, but I hope chat like this one will help in communicating what we are doing.
Yep. And we have to remember that we need to make sure we're approachable and not saying, you're dumb, we're smart. We need to just sit there and pull up a chair at the table and make sure they feel safe coming to our table. We need to make sure they feel like they want us to come to their table as well to have conversations. We need to all start playing in the same sandbox because we are connected.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. You want to add something more to this World Milk Day chat?
We are just excited because June 1st is just around the corner, and in the US, June is a very big deal. It is Dairy Month, so look out in your local communities because there's going to be dairy princesses across the country wearing their crowns and telling milk's wonderful story and handing out dairy products galore, and make sure to eat plenty of ice cream and enjoy summer.
Good. Excellent. So happy Milk Day. Now, let me introduce our next guest, Adam Locke, Professor Adam Locke. Thank you, Adam, for joining us to this Milk Day chat.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate the opportunity to have these discussions with you.
Adam Locke is a professor in the Department of Animal Science at Michigan State University. Originally from a dairy farm in the southwest of the United Kingdom, Adam moved to his current research and extension appointment at Michigan State University in 2009. His recent work has focused on fatty acid absorption, fat supplementation strategies, milk fat depression, and the regulation of milk fat synthesis. He is recognized for his ability to communicate to many sectors, from dairy farmers to dietitians, and was recently awarded the 2019 American Feed Industry Association Award for his contributions to research of dairy cattle nutrition by the American Dairy Science Association. So, Adam, you are an expert of fats and in particular milk fats. Today we are celebrating the World Dairy Milk Production, but every day, constantly, we hear confusing messages about milk consumption, and the so-called plant-based milk is gaining more and more market share. Considering the health concerns connected with drinking dairy milk, is there any risk or not? So may you clarify this point for our audience?
Well, thank you, Richard. Appreciate the opportunity. I think first of all, there's a lot to unpack in those couple comments that you have there. It's certainly a emotive topic as well, and there's been a lot of emerging science and better understanding over the last 10 years that the role that milk and dairy products play in human health, and now more recently how some of these plant-based products, what role do they play in terms of having similar benefits or nutrient packages compared to milk? So I think let's first of all talk about where milk fits in there, or and then let's try and talk a little about those plant-based products. I think it's important that when we're talking about the human diet or feeding producing animals as well, let's remember that the purpose of the food that we produce in the dairy industry and other food industries is that we want to be able to supply nutrients within that balanced diet that we can help sustain development, growth, and health and well-being of the human population throughout their life cycle. And dairy has been an important part of that for a long, long time, right? There's a reason why the dairy industry is developed in the way it is, and a key part of that is the great package of nutrients that it brings. There's a lot of essential nutrients, minerals, vitamins, high quality protein, important fatty acids, good source of energy that dairy products bring to the human diet, and that I think it's important that we remember that. Okay, so milk and dairy products are nutrient-rich foods, and that's the reason why so many countries and the health and dietary guidelines in so many countries recommend a number of servings of dairy every day. There's a lot of sound science that supports and backs that up as milk being a complete nutrient package. I think a key thing we often forget there is the protein quality. Animal-based proteins are the best source of amino acids, best protein quality that the human diet can have. And there's data across many different countries showing the importance of animal-based protein, especially in the growth of the younger population. But it's not just the protein, as we talk about the fats, the fat in there, good source of energy, key fatty acids that we're learning more about, and maybe we'll talk about saturated fat in a little while there. But I think a key concept here is that milk and dairy products, they provide a higher level of key and essential nutrients compared to their calorie content. So often people talk about that as nutrient richness or nutrient density. So if you compare, let's say, get 100 calories of energy from a milk product, or 100 calories from a soda, or even one of these plant-based products, you get the same amount of energy, but what are the key nutrients that you bring to the table. And that's where this nutrient richness, I think, comes from here. I think that's a part of that. And again, that's why dairy products are included in dietary recommendations by public health organizations across the world. There's a lot of data out there that says because of this, that consuming milk and dairy products improves overall nutrient density of the diet and really is a marker of a high quality diet in any population. That ability to have those milk and dairy products does lead to a better quality diet there. You know, and as I think you were alluding to there, Richard, that, you know, there is increasing research now, and we're reevaluating previous research that is challenging that long-held dogma or that negativity around milk fat and human health. You know, and there's a reason why milk fat, butter, and whole milk products are gaining popularity again as we're readdressing that 30 or 40 year negativity around milk fat, and that's one of the areas that I've been very passionate about, and others have been very passionate about for a long time now. So we are challenging that whole concept around saturated fat, saturated fatty acids.
But still, Adam, sorry if I interrupt you, but still, when you go to a dietitian, first thing they tell you is to use low-fat milk. So still, we're not there yet.
Well, so we're not there all the way yet, but slow progress is still progress. So I think we have turned that oil tank around, to use that analogy. It takes a while to turn something like that around. But a lot of the data that's coming out now around milk and human health is still based around data where there was a lot of whole milk consumption. You know, I think, you know, one of the biggest negative health impacts of that drive to drop saturated fat for a long time, or lower fat content of diet, was a couple things. One, it drove the production and use of partially hydrogenated vegetable oils and, you know, artificial butters as such, and we now know a lot of the negativity around that. But probably an even bigger issue, it drove people away from higher fat or whole food diets and to these high carbohydrates, high processed carbohydrates. And that's a much bigger health issue, as we're now understanding, than the consumption of whole milk dairy products. So, you know, there's a lot of education and that we need to do there, and talking more about that. But the data is really more and more there now to support, you know, number of servings of dairy in the diet and our ability to utilize whole milk dairy, obviously keeping in mind overall calorie content of diets as well. But, you know, there's a lot of ways that we overindulge on calories there. But, you know, when we look at some of this data now, for a long time, people have tended to focus on single nutrients in our diets, you know, or a single fatty acid or this nutrient. But when you're talking about dairy, or any food really, we're talking about consuming foods. You know, dairy is a whole nutrient package, you know, and it's important that we try and evaluate that. And, you know, there's a lot of large epidemiological type studies that have come out the last 10 years that talk about the health benefits of dairy. And one of the best quotes I like about that, when they were looking at cardiovascular disease risk, cancer risk, etc., that there was talked about an overall survival advantage of increased dairy product consumption. That in those studies that people with the higher intake of dairy products had an overall survival advantage in terms of these long-term major health risks in the diet. And I think that's a key thing to sort of take home from some of that. So, you know, there is a lot of data out there to support dairy's role in a healthy diet, and that's been established for a long time by government, science communities, etc., and, you know, evolution as well there.
So of course we don't not have to confound excess consumption with normal and balanced consumption as usual for everything, because sometimes there is a lot of confusion. They take overconsumption as normal consumption, and this brings to excess. So you mentioned artificial fat. Do you think, I remember in the past you mentioned it, artificial fat or margarine was seen as the healthiest alternative to butter, and now it's completely the opposite. Do you think we will face a similar evolution with plant-based milk?
That's a good question, and you know, so first of all, I don't like the use of that term milk when we're talking about these plant-based beverages, whether it's soy or different nut juices that are produced and marketed or claiming to be milk. I just personally have an issue with that. I could see us going there because there are big differences and disparities in the nutritional quality that what one receives from dairy milk product and some of these juices or plant-based products, I guess the best way to use it. You know, certainly, you know, there's you know recommendations here in the US about cow's milk should not be removed, particularly from young children's diets, unless there's a medical indication. You know, these non-dairy based products, you know, do vary in their nutritional profile hugely. You know, many are fortified with calcium, but what about all of the other vitamins and minerals that come in a dairy package? Not forgetting what we talked about earlier on, the benefits of animal protein in terms of the protein and amino acid quality that you get in animal source protein compared to plant-based proteins. You know, we need to establish that nutrient quality and the bioavailability from some of these other products as well. But certainly they don't supply the same degree of nutrients. They're not nutritionally equivalent to dairy products. You know, milk is a natural nutrient package that these plant-based products and fortified foods, they can't beat that, right? You know, and also, you know, milk is a very consistent, standardized product, milk and dairy products in the diet. And we don't know about, you know, these other products and what nutrients that they bring. And again, you know, we can just think about some of the, you know, number of ingredients that have to be added into some of these plant-based products as well to get them to even be mimicking dairy. I mean, it's ironic that all of these plant-based products, what they're trying to do is mimic dairy, right? In terms of the nutrient package it brings. Now, the other part of that is cost. You know, my understanding is a lot of these, or majority of these plant-based products cost multiple fold times more than what dairy does if you take milk from a glass of milk, you know, and how many ingredients are in there. You know, I think a regular glass of milk contains probably 3 ingredients, right? So in the US, you know, we add vitamin D to milk, but other than that, just milk, right? And some of these others probably contain at least 10 ingredients, right, to make them mimic, you know, multiple folds. So, you know, in terms of nutrient quality and supplying good nutrients to diets at an affordable cost to improve overall diet quality, milk, in my mind, wins out every single time there.
Absolutely.
But you know, we don't know. You know, you know, hopefully going forward, we continue to stop some of these products being used at using that word milk as well. I think that is inappropriate. But you know, in terms of you know, I think it's important that consumers have choices, right? And there's a whole different range of choices that dairy products can have out there. You know, and there are some members of the population can't consume certain types of dairy. You know, maybe there's a lactose intolerance or an issue of certain amino protein.
But we have lactose-free milk.
Yeah, but there are alternatives within the dairy aisle that allow for that choice. But we need to get away from this concept that just because 2 things are labeled as milk that they're nutritionally equivalent when clearly they're not.
Yeah. And also you mentioned lactose, but I think also the the sugar content of those products is quite variable, and it can be even higher than milk, natural milk. Sometimes.
Oh, I'm sure they are, and it's mostly added sugar as well, right? Not lactose.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important part of that. Yeah.
So there are now a fashion about superfoods, and we hear new ones coming out every day, and most of them comes from far away. So what about dairy meat? Can we consider it as a superfood? From what you are saying, I suppose yes, meat is a superfood.
Oh, undoubtedly, I totally agree with that. Again, it has a unique nutrient package that's kind of unmatched in the human diet in terms of, again, the number of vitamins and minerals, essential nutrients, high quality protein, energy. It is a great source of those more macro type nutrients, and we're starting to understand more and more some of the more sort of micronutrients that are in there, or specific fatty acids, or the role of specific proteins in dairy, and the benefits that they may have on the human diet as well. So in terms of dairy products ability, milk's ability to enhance and improve the quality of human diets and help improve health maintenance and disease prevention, I think it's definitely a superfood.
So let's do a step forward. Everybody now knows about the so-called animal-free meat. And this is not only the plant-based alternative, but also now that it's taking more and more steps forward, the so-called lab meat. But maybe not everyone has heard about cows-free milk or cows-free dairy products that are coming out on the market now. So can you tell us something about that? What do you think about these products?
Well, I admit I don't know anything about how they do it per se. I assume it's through some sort of modified yeast or microbial fermentation. But I think something to remember here is how milk is produced in the dairy industry. Ruminants, wide range of ruminants in agricultural production and in nature. How milk is produced and that unique role that ruminants have in our ecosystem, whether that's domesticated or wild. A very large proportion of the diet that a dairy cow eats to produce milk, which has that great nutrient package, a great part of that diet is foods that we as humans can eat, or it's byproducts of human industries. You take, for example, grasses, pasture, different herbs maybe grazed wherever they are, different forages, we can't consume them, right? And a lot of those are grown on land that maybe not be grown for other things. We then take all of the, there's hundreds and hundreds of different byproducts from human food and fiber industries, right? Cottonseed, distillers grains, sugar beet pulp, soy hulls,
almond hulls,
almond hulls. Go wherever you sort of want to think in citrus waste. A lot of different things. This is waste products that would go into landfill mostly otherwise, but because of that unique rumen and rumen fermentation, ruminants can break that down into nutrients and then repackage that in their system and use those nutrients to produce milk that we've just discussed as a superfood in the human diet. So that wouldn't be happening in a fermentation vat in a lab somewhere. So in terms of as we've talked about earlier, the importance of us in the agriculture industry sustaining food production to help meet the needs and health of a growing world population, we need to continue to utilize ruminants in the best ways we can, improving efficiency of ruminant production to convert non-human edible foods into milk and dairy products and ruminant meats as well. So I don't see that as as a sustainable and viable way going forward. Certainly, I can't see how it would be economically viable for the large number of the population that would really benefit from that improvement in diet quality from milk and dairy products.
Yeah, this is interesting because basically this is the exact opposite message they are communicating on the different websites. They say because the cows are polluting, we produce milk, artificial milk in the lab, and we are not polluting with methane, and we are not using products that can be used for human consumption. So something is wrong there, I think, in the communication about the real milk production.
Yeah, I think, obviously I don't know the company or what you said there, the name of the people, but there's some marketing. There's marketing there as well. So yeah, but that's where the whole sort of life cycle assessments have to come into some of these type of things. But there's no getting away. Yes, there is some grains used in dairy cow diets, but it's not the whole diet. A large part of that diet is basically waste products from other industries or grown on or feeds that we can't even consume. And I think that's an important message that we need to make going forward. And not taking away, Italy's a great example of that. Some of the very unique and dairy products produced, different unique cheeses produced in the world that can only be produced in certain areas because of certain feeds that the cows are eating. Let's not forget some of those important aspects of our diet quality as well.
And luckily, following the GDP, in particular in the developing countries, the milk consumption is growing in the next years. So the FAO is evaluating a huge increase in milk consumption, and real milk, not plant-based milk.
Yeah, well, again, that comes down to improving diet quality, and somewhat maybe improving affluence in nations as well. But again, there's reasons why governments are promoting milk and dairy products because it improves human health and quality of life. So,
yeah. So, do you see we still have some opportunity in dairy milk? We are not considering yet. There is still something we can ameliorate. We can improve efficiency of our animals. We can improve the nutrients through utilization of amino acids and the better diet balancing. What do you see we can do more?
Well, I think you touched on many of them there, improving efficiency and sustainability of the farming operations. Improving nutrient use, nutrient efficiency will help with greenhouse gas emissions, right? We need to continue to tackle those things. Every food production system, whether it's on a farm or in a lab, has environmental impact. So we need to continue to drive that forward. The dairy industry over the last 50 years has made huge strides in terms of improvements in efficiency and sustainability. We need to continue that. I think we need to continue to better understand the role of milk and dairy products in the human diet, maybe even identifying other key bioactives in dairy. And we also need to continue to develop products that consumers want. There has been and probably will continue to be a drive for dairy product consumption over fluid milk consumption, especially in more countries where have a longer term intake of dairy. So that may require dairy producers, the dairy industry, supplying milk that processors and consumers need more. Whether that's different levels of fat or protein, different qualities of those, different types of those. So I think there's a lot of innovation that we can continue to have in the dairy industry on that side. And then as well, I think we need to find better ways to communicate the science and the messages around the dairy industry, you know, in terms of what some of the things we've talked about nutrient quality and healthfulness of milk and dairy products. But I 100% think that animal source foods, especially dairy products, are going to continue and maybe play a more important role in meeting that challenge going forward of sustainable food security and meeting the demands of our rapidly growing population. I think the dairy industry has a great and very important role to play there as we move forward in this century now. You know, I think we do need to continue to focus on promoting that unique role of dairy products, you know, the essential nutrients, high quality protein that we do there. And I like that term, that overall survival advantage of dairy product, milk and dairy product consumption, and the role that dairy has in promoting health maintenance and disease prevention. And I think there is going to continue to be increased consumer acceptance of full fat dairy products. I know, you know, slow progress is progress, but I think that progress is going to continue as we go on. I think consumers in general are much more health conscious and increasingly aware nowadays of where their food comes from. I think consumers are better at recognizing the impact of foods that they eat and the impact they may have on their health and wellness, but also on environment around them. And I think that's where, as a dairy industry, we need to better sort of tap into that awareness and help improve that and highlight the vital role that dairy plays in that.
Yeah, you mentioned communication, and I think this is very important because agriculture was perceived in the past as nature's caretaker, but now is nature's destroyer. So we really have to communicate the benefit of the animal products in general, but also what there is behind that. As you mentioned, the science and all the work we are doing to improve these productions. And I think as a faculty, communication is important also from your side. I mean, how do you try to communicate to your students this that they will be the planet feeders of the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good comment, and I think it comes back to what I said earlier on about better connecting with the consumers. You know, probably going forward, and there already is. There's different ways of communicating with people, including students now, than there was 5, 10, 15 years ago, right? So, you know, I'm not sure I have a specific answer on that. I think from my perspective, it's important to deal with the science and the facts, and then, you know, help address that as the need arises. But, you know, I think people are gonna continue to want to seek out information on diet quality and environmental impacts, and it's probably important that we help, or we have resources that are factually based, because unfortunately there's so much information or misinformation out there that it's easy to get think you're reading something that's factually correct when, you know, facts maybe sometimes aren't facts, and that goes across the whole level of the population, unfortunately, right now. So
yeah, and let's hope that chats like this one will help to better communicate and to open minds in the future.
Yes, yeah, it's great that you did this. I appreciate the opportunity.
Do you have a last take-home message for our audience?
Well, I think that the last sort of kind of take home I have is really around that whole concept of overall nutritional quality, health maintenance, and in terms of dairy products from ruminants, from dairy cows, I think all milk from dairy cows should be promoted for its significant contribution to our nutrient supply and its benefits on human health.
Okay. Thank you, Adam. Thank you for participating. I really appreciate it. Thank you to all of you that are listening to us, and happy milk day to everybody.